My name is Linda Calloway. The day I collapsed, I had just finished setting the table for a dinner that no one ever showed up to. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with a flutter behind my eyes, a strange, dizzying weight that pressed into my skull while I was stirring the gravy. The smell of thyme and onions filled the kitchen, and the roast was just beginning to brown to that perfect golden hue. I remember feeling proud, the kind of quiet pride that comes when you know you've done something right for people you love. That was the last moment of peace before everything changed. I must have leaned too far, or stood too fast. All I know is the next thing I felt was the cold tile against my cheek, and the muffled thud of the spoon clattering to the floor. The ceiling blurred in and out like a scratched film reel, and for a few seconds I wondered if this was it. If this was how it would end. On a kitchen floor in a floral apron, still wearing my house slippers alone. But I didn't die. I woke up a few minutes later, or maybe longer. My chest ached, and my left hand tingled like it had been dipped in static. I tried to call out, but the only thing that came was a croak. I reached for my phone still lying on the counter and dragged myself toward it. It took 3 tries to dial 911. My fingers weren't listening to me, and the room still swam in odd shapes. When the dispatcher answered, I couldn't even describe what happened. I remember her voice, calm, young, trying to keep me alert. I told her I was 62, lived alone, and felt something wasn't right. That was all I could manage. They arrived quickly. Sirens I didn't hear until the door was already open. I must have left it unlocked. The paramedics were kind, firm, efficient. One of them gently touched my shoulder and said, "You're okay now, Ms. Calloway. We've got you." And just like that, I was in the ambulance. As we pulled away, I watched my street blur past through the back window. The neighbors' porch lights twinkled in the dusk, and I suddenly remembered the dinner I had prepared: roast chicken, garlic, green beans, mashed potatoes. My son David liked them extra buttery. My daughter-in-law Melissa always commented on how Grandma's food tastes like Sunday. I had been expecting them around 7. I glanced at the clock on my phone. 6:48 p.m. I didn't want to worry them, so I sent a quick message in the family group chat. Had to go to the ER, feeling faint. Will update when I know more. I thought anyone would respond immediately, but no one did. When I got to the hospital, they ran tests quickly: EKG, CT scan, blood work. They asked about my medical history, past strokes, heart conditions. I had none of that. Just mild high blood pressure and cholesterol, which I'd managed for years. The doctor, a young man with careful eyes, told me they were keeping me overnight for observation. Mild TIA possibly. A warning sign, he said. You're lucky you called when you did. Lucky. That word echoed in my mind. Because as I lay there under bright fluorescent lights tucked under a too thin blanket, I checked my phone again. 10 minutes had passed. Then 20. Then an hour. Still no reply. The group chat showed seen by David, Melissa, Carly, Ryan. All of them had opened the message. None of them had said a word. I stared at the screen, willing a notification to appear. Maybe a call. Maybe just, "Are you okay, Mom?" But there was nothing. I kept refreshing the chat until I accidentally tapped on a photo someone had sent just before my message. A selfie, all of them at a theme park. Melissa was smiling with cotton candy. David had his arm around Ryan near a roller coaster. Carly, my granddaughter, wore light-up ears. They all looked joyful, relaxed, completely unbothered. And I was in a hospital gown, my chest wired to machines, tasting metal and loneliness. I didn't cry. I just stared at that image, frozen, timeless, and felt something break softly inside me. I'd been invisible before. Forgotten at birthdays, brushed aside in conversations, reduced to grandma or mom when they needed a favor, but never like this. Never when my life was in danger. I thought maybe they hadn't seen the message in time, but the timestamp said otherwise. Seen. Ignored. I stared at the fluorescent ceiling. It was the kind of light that made everything feel cold and temporary. I'd spent my whole life making sure no one ever felt forgotten. Even when they forgot me, I showed up. I cooked. I forgave. I kept the family stitched together like patchwork on an old quilt. But who was sewing me back together? The nurse came by to check on me. Her name was April, maybe in her 30s, with tired eyes and a gentle voice. She offered to call someone for me, and I smiled weakly and said, "No need. They're probably just busy." She nodded. Maybe she believed me. Maybe she'd heard it all before. After she left, I stared at the photo again, my family having fun, while I lay in a sterile room wondering if I even mattered. It was the first time I truly asked myself, what if I stopped trying to matter to people who only see me when it's convenient? It was a dangerous question, one that would only grow louder in the coming days. The beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound that reminded me I was still there. The hallway outside my hospital room was oddly quiet for a Saturday night. I expected more chaos, gurneys flying by, urgent footsteps, someone crying out in pain. But it was just me. Me and the hum of machines and the sour scent of antiseptic. I stared at the same text thread I'd looked at a dozen times already, as if this time the responses would magically appear. But the thread remained the same, my message at 6:52 p.m. A single line swallowed by a stream of amusement park photos that kept coming after it. As if I hadn't even spoken. David had posted a video an hour later, Carly trying to win a giant teddy bear at the ring toss. Melissa commented she's getting better every time. My message was still right there, just a few inches up the thread. It was like I'd sent it from another planet. I know what some people might think. Maybe they didn't understand how serious it was. Maybe they thought I was exaggerating. Maybe I should have called. But I had called. Twice. David's phone rang 3 times before it went to voicemail. I didn't even try, Melissa. I knew better. And I didn't want to call Carly. She was 15. A child. Not the one who should carry the responsibility of caring. I pressed the nurse's call button again. April returned a few minutes later with that same soft smile, her notepad already in hand. "Still no family?" she asked gently. I shook my head. I just thought, maybe they got caught up. She looked at me in a way I couldn't quite read, like she wanted to say something kind but didn't want to cross a line. Instead, she asked if I wanted a cup of tea. I said yes. Not because I wanted it, but because I didn't want her to leave too quickly. When she returned with the tea, I asked, "Do you ever see people here who don't have anyone show up?" She paused for a moment, more than I'd like to admit. I nodded, fingers curled around the warm paper cup. "What do you think happens to them after?" She sat at the edge of the room, not quite leaving but not staying long either. "I think they get used to remembering themselves when others forget. Some of them get stronger. Some of them disappear a little more every day." That answer lingered in the room long after she left. I stared at the blank ceiling again, but this time I wasn't wondering if I'd be okay. I was wondering when exactly I became the kind of mother no one bothered to check on. It hadn't always been this way. David used to cling to me like his whole world rested on the curve of my arm. When he was little, he'd run to me for every scraped knee, every stormy night, every science fair meltdown. He cried into my neck the day his best friend moved away in 5th grade. He once said, "I'll always come find you, Mom, even when I'm big." Melissa used to be so warm before the baby, before the busy schedules. She'd call me to ask for recipes, for advice, for comfort when the baby had a fever. And I gave it all freely. I didn't count how much I gave. I only noticed years later when they stopped giving anything back. I wasn't bitter then. Not yet. Just tired. Tired of showing up for people who only noticed my presence when it was useful. I put my phone down, turned off the screen. The light from it only made the darkness around it worse. It was nearly 10 p.m. when the doctor returned with more results. It looks like you had a mild TIA, a transient ischemic attack, he explained. It's sometimes called a mini stroke. You're very lucky. There's no permanent damage, but we'll need to follow up. I nodded, trying to absorb the words. You'll be discharged in the morning. Someone coming to get you. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I'll figure something out. He hesitated. It's important to have someone keep an eye on you for the next few days. The irony burned. I had spent my entire life keeping an eye on everyone else now. I needed just one day of care, and the house of cards collapsed. I slept badly that night, the kind of sleep that's too light to be restful, but too dark to be conscious. My dreams were a tangle of empty chairs and unanswered phones. When I woke up just before dawn, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. I checked my phone again. Still no response. But they'd seen it. They'd all seen it. That fact was now a bruise I couldn't cover up. April returned at 7:30 to unhook the monitor leads from my chest. She helped me sit up slowly, asked if I was dizzy. I was, but not in the way she meant. The paperwork was signed. A taxi had been arranged. I told her I didn't want to bother anyone. She didn't argue, just patted my hand and said, "Don't forget, people can't love you right if they never learn how. And sometimes, it's okay to stop teaching them." I didn't answer. The driver was a quiet man in his 40s with a soft country music station playing in the background. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer anything. When we pulled up in front of my house, I was struck by how normal it looked, as if nothing had happened. The porch light still glowed faintly, my potted fern still drooped with the same weariness I felt. The driver asked, "You need help getting inside?" I shook my head. "No, thank you." I stood in front of the door for a moment before unlocking it, my hand trembling slightly, not from the after effects of the stroke, but from something heavier. The house was cold. No note on the door, no leftover plates, no signs of concern or question. Just silence. I went into the kitchen. The roast chicken was still sitting in the cold oven. The mashed potatoes had hardened in the pot like old cement. I stared at it all for a long time before finally whispering out loud to no one in particular. "Is this what I've become to them? I didn't eat the food. I couldn't." I stood there in the kitchen for what felt like hours, unable to throw it away, unable to reheat it. It was like looking at a memorial, not to the dinner itself, but to everything I had been willing to give them. A small part of me still hoped maybe they'd realized. Maybe they were on their way now, bringing apologies and flowers and guilt. Maybe they'd burst through the door breathless and ashamed, asking why I hadn't told them it was serious. But the hours passed, and the only thing that came through the door was stillness. By noon, I gave up and put the food into containers. I didn't label them. I wasn't sure why I bothered keeping it at all. Habit, maybe. It's funny how motherhood trains you to preserve everything for someone else, even disappointment. I sat on the couch in silence, my robe still half open, the hospital band still clinging to my wrist. I thought I might cry, but the tears never came. Just a numb ache. Familiar in a strange way. Because this wasn't the first time they forgot me. It was just the first time it nearly cost me my life. Years ago, after my husband died, I thought we might get closer. I was 49 when the cancer took him. He was the glue, in many ways the loud one, the storyteller, the father who grilled in the backyard while the kids ran barefoot in the grass. After his funeral, I had this naive hope that the absence would pull us tighter. But what it did instead was reveal a gap I hadn't wanted to see. Without him, they didn't really know how to connect with me. I was just there. Just mom. Background noise. The one who cooked, reminded them about dentist appointments, sent birthday cards for their friends' kids. I became functional. A machine. Predictable, reliable, always fine. And when you're always fine, no one checks in to see if you're not. I started to remember birthdays that no one remembered back. I spent holidays in a kitchen while the rest of them scrolled through phones in the living room. I smiled in photos I wasn't asked to be part of. And I never said anything. Because I thought love was about staying. I thought if I kept showing up, they would too. But they didn't. Instead, they learned that I would forgive the silence. That I'd keep baking the pies even when no one said thank you. That I'd smile when they changed plans without telling me, or when they used my house like a pit stop between errands. It didn't happen all at once. That's the danger of slow neglect. You don't notice how cold the room has become until you've been shivering for years. I looked down at the hospital bracelet again. The ink was already fading, but the memory wasn't. I thought about the group chat still blinking with unread messages, still echoing with laughter and emojis and sun hats. My message still sat there, alone, like me. They weren't monsters. That's the thing. I couldn't even hate them. They were just self-involved, busy, wrapped in their own narratives. To them, I was a fixture, a pillar, the one who never broke down. Until I did. I picked up the phone and opened the chat again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could type something sharp, something raw. Thanks for checking in. I almost had a stroke alone last night. But no worries, theme parks are more important. But I didn't write it. Not because I was scared. Because I didn't want to beg for attention anymore. I locked the phone and set it face down. A few minutes later, the screen buzzed. I flipped it over, heart fluttering, ridiculous as it was, and saw it was Melissa. A photo of Carly, holding a bubble tea. No message. No, how are you feeling? No, I'm sorry we missed your text. Just a smiling face, on a bright sunny day. And in that moment, something in me settled. Not broke. Settled. Like a realization that finally found a place to land. This was how they saw me. Peripheral. Optional. Quiet. And maybe it was time I stopped letting them. I stood up slowly. My body was still sore, unsteady, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I walked to my bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Tired. Pale. But not defeated. I traced the lines around my eyes. Thought about all the years I'd spent pouring my strength into people who didn't know how to return it. And I whispered to my reflection, not with bitterness, but with a calm that surprised me. No more. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat at the kitchen table and made myself a full breakfast: eggs toast, sliced tomatoes, and a cup of tea. Just for me. No one was coming. No one had asked if I was hungry. And I wasn't about to pretend I was invisible anymore, at least not to myself. The sun filtered through the curtains, dust floating lazily in the beams of light. It was a peaceful scene, the kind you'd see in a painting. But inside my stomach twisted. Not from the food, but from the silence that still hadn't been broken. I had gotten nothing. No call from David. No text from Melissa. No knock at the door. No apology. Not even a casual check-in. Only Carly had messaged one line last night. Mom said you went to the doctor. Everything okay? I responded simply, home now. Thanks for asking. She didn't reply. And I didn't expect her to. I pushed my plate away and opened my phone almost without thinking. The group chat was still pinned at the top. I hadn't touched it since yesterday, hadn't dared to. But today, I was ready. I tapped the icon and the screen opened. The last photo was the bubble tea from Melissa. Under it, David had commented, "She's turning into a little sugar monster." I scrolled up, past the carousel selfies, past Melissa's best day ever caption, back to the moment where I had written, "Had to go to the ER. Feeling faint. Will update when I know more." The message sat there, sandwiched between amusement and emoji laughter. And then I saw something I hadn't noticed before, something that sent a shiver through my entire body. There was a reply, but not to me. David had responded 5 minutes after I posted my message. "Do we want to get dinner around 8? Carly's starving already, lol. Melissa had answered with yes. I'm craving tacos. That was it. That was their reaction, not to my health scare, not to the fact that their mother had just gone to the ER alone, but to Carly's appetite. I had been pushed out of the conversation like I didn't exist. They had seen my message, and they had skipped right past it. Not out of ignorance, out of choice. My hand tightened around the phone, knuckles white. I wanted to scream, to throw it across the room, but I didn't. Instead, I pressed and held David's message, the one about tacos. I stared at the tiny options that appeared: reply, forward, react. I hovered over reply for just a second. Then I exited the app. What would it change? Nothing. They'd ignore me again. Or worse, make me feel crazy for being upset. That had happened before. Once I had told Melissa I felt like she'd been distant. She smiled, sweet as syrup, and said, "Oh no, Mom, you're just sensitive lately." Sensitive. Like it was a flaw. Like I was a cracked glass no one wanted to hold too tightly. I used to think maybe I was too sensitive. But now I realized it wasn't sensitivity. It was awareness. I saw what they were doing. I saw it clearly for the first time. And once you see a wound, you can't pretend it's not bleeding. The truth was, I had trained them to treat me this way. I had shown them that I would accept being ignored, that I would smile through the silence, that I would celebrate their birthdays while they forgot mine, that I would babysit, lend money, host dinners, all without ever asking for anything in return. Because I thought love was earned through endurance. But that's not love. That's servitude dressed in politeness. I sat at the table, phone still warm in my hand, and realized something else, something colder. They were happy without me. The photos, the comments, the laughter. Not a single trace of guilt. Not even the polite performance of worry. It wasn't that they were distracted or busy or tired. It was that they were fine with me disappearing. They just didn't want to say it. And now that I knew that, I had a choice. I could keep showing up pretending not to notice, pretending to be Mom, the ever-smiling provider. Or I could stop. Not with anger, not with dramatics, just with silence. The same silence they gave me. I got up from the table and walked slowly to the bookshelf in the living room. I reached behind the photo frames, the ones no one ever dusted but me, and pulled out the notebook I kept for private thoughts. I hadn't written in it in over a year, but today I had something to say. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote in steady, precise handwriting. August 6th. Today I realized I'm no longer a mother. Not in the way they need, not in the way I used to be. I'm a figure, a shape in the corner of their lives, and I have to decide if I'm okay being that, or if I want to become something more for myself. I set the pen down. My hands trembled not from weakness but from clarity. I wasn't sad anymore. I was done waiting. It wasn't until I picked up the phone to schedule my follow-up appointment that I realized something deeper had shifted inside me. The receptionist at the clinic, cheerful and robotic, said, "You'll need someone to accompany you after the scan. Do you have family you can list on file?" The question hung in the air. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I couldn't say David because I knew he wouldn't come. Not unless I made it sound like an emergency. And even then, it would be a begrudging favor squeezed between business calls. I couldn't say Melissa. She'd likely send a text and then disappear for a week. I couldn't say Carly, she was a teenager, barely a foot in the world yet. And I had no right to place that burden on her. So I said the only thing that felt honest: no, it'll just be me. The silence on the other end lasted a half-second too long. Then came the chirpy, trained reply. "All right, I'll just make a note of that. We'll see you next Thursday." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone in my hand, like it had turned into something foreign. That moment stayed with me for hours, because for the first time in decades, I said it out loud. I have no one. Not no one in the world. Not entirely. I had neighbors, acquaintances, a few old colleagues I exchanged Christmas cards with. But the people who should have been there, the ones whose birthdays I never missed, whose scraped knees I kissed, whose bills I quietly helped pay, they were gone. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, willfully, gone. That night, I sat in the living room and looked through old photo albums. The thick, leather-bound kind pages sticking together from years of humidity. I flipped through baby pictures, family holidays, birthdays, smiling faces, blurry candles, chubby fingers. My younger self always behind the camera, always the one making everyone else shine. I stared at a photo from David's 8th birthday. He was sitting on my lap, cake icing on his cheek, arms thrown around my neck. I looked so happy, so full. That version of me would have never believed what we'd become. I thought about the roast dinner, the hospital bed, the empty kitchen, the chat messages left unread, and I made a decision. I would stop chasing people who didn't even glance over their shoulder to see if I was following, not in anger, not in vengeance, just in truth. That night, I didn't text anyone. I didn't call to remind them about Carly's piano recital, or ask about Melissa's job interview, or offer to help with the dog sitting next weekend. Instead, I went for a walk. It was already dark, the streetlights buzzing with that low hum that reminded me of summer nights decades ago. The air smelled like warm pavement and someone's barbecue down the road. I passed by houses with open windows and laughter spilling out. Not mine. Mine stayed shut, sealed like a tomb of good intentions. I ended up at the small bench near the community garden. No one else was there, just me and the faint rustling of leaves. And it felt good, peaceful, real. I sat down and closed my eyes, and I thought, what if I just stopped? Stopped cooking every Sunday like they were still showing up. Stopped answering the phone every time David needed something. Stopped filling the freezer with meals for Melissa just in case. Stopped pretending their neglect didn't hurt. What if I let myself grieve the idea of the family I thought I had and let go of the role they no longer valued? Not to punish them, but to free myself. I sat on that bench until the mosquitoes reminded me I was still alive. Then I walked home slowly, the night folding around me like a soft blanket. When I got inside, I turned off the porch light, something I used to leave on for David just in case he dropped by. He hadn't done that in over a year, so I switched it off, and it stayed off. The silence was no longer accidental. It was deliberate. That week, I did not message David. I didn't send a reminder about Carly's recital. I didn't check in with Melissa to see if she was still job hunting. I didn't comment on their social media posts, didn't click the heart, didn't answer the phone. Because for once, I wanted to know what would happen if I stopped being the glue. I thought maybe they'd call, maybe they'd worry, maybe they'd realize I was missing from the narrative of their lives. But 5 days passed and nothing changed. Then on the 6th day, my phone finally rang. It was David. For a moment, I stared at his name glowing on the screen. My hand hovered uncertain, not because I was angry, because I suddenly realized I didn't owe him my immediate response anymore. Still, I answered. "Hey," I said, voice even. "Mom," he replied, upbeat. "You busy this weekend?" I blinked. Not, "How are you?" Not, "Are you feeling better?" Just a logistical question, as if I were his assistant. "No, not particularly," I said slowly. "Great," he said. "We need someone to watch Carly Saturday afternoon. Melissa has a thing for work and I've got a golf game. Should be easy, just a few hours. You in?" The silence that followed was long enough for him to say "Mom" twice. I could feel it in my chest, the familiar tug of guilt. The habit to say yes. The reflex of a mother who always stepped in. But I didn't. "I don't think I can," I said. Calm? Clear. David sounded confused. Oh, everything okay? Just tired, I said. Tired like sick again? He asked, the first flicker of concern seeping into his voice, but not quite enough. No, just tired of being invisible. Silence. Then, what's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer right away. I wanted to. I had a dozen sentences lined up in my mind. Speeches, examples, evidence. But I knew better. People don't change because of proof. They change when their comfort is disturbed. So I just said, "You didn't even ask how the hospital went." He went quiet again. Melissa said you just went in for a dizzy spell. We figured you were fine. I was alone in the ER. Overnight. No one came. No one called. Not even the next day. He exhaled. Okay. I mean, I guess we should have followed up, but it wasn't like it was like that. I said this time with more weight. It was exactly like that. David tried to recover. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. We were already out and it seemed like a minor thing. I let the silence answer him. You're really saying no? He asked, disbelief in his tone now. I'm saying I need to take care of myself for once, I replied. I'm not angry. I'm just done being everyone's backup plan. He sighed. Wow. Okay. Didn't expect that. I didn't expect to be forgotten while I was hooked to heart monitors either. He didn't reply. After a moment he mumbled, I'll figure something out. I'm sure you will, I said gently. And I hung up. No yelling. No dramatics. Just a quiet line drawn. And I sat there for a long while afterward, letting the weight of that decision settle. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. Because the longer you play the role of the overlooked, the more you start to believe that's all you're worth. And I was done believing that. The next day, Melissa sent me a string of texts. David said you were upset. Sorry if we dropped the ball. We didn't mean to make you feel ignored. Carly was looking forward to seeing you Saturday. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. But because I had nothing left to say that they were ready to hear. Instead, I made plans for myself. I visited the little used bookstore downtown, the one I hadn't gone to in years. I bought 2 novels and sat in the back corner sipping bitter black coffee and reading in the hush. Then I went to the flower market. I bought a bouquet not to decorate the house for guests, but because I liked the way the lilies smelled. That night, I lit a candle. I cooked a small dinner just for me, and I sat at the table alone, not out of loneliness, but choice. The food tasted different when I wasn't aching for someone else to appreciate it. It tasted like freedom. The next family gathering was David's birthday. Melissa sent a message in the group chat, cheerful, perky, full of exclamation points. Sunday dinner for David's big day, potluck style, 5 p.m. at our place. She tagged everyone, even me. But I didn't respond. Not with a yes, not with a no. I simply read the message and closed the app. I sat with the silence that followed. Not the painful kind, the kind that wrapped itself around me like a wool shawl, comforting, earned. Sunday arrived. At 4:55 p.m., I was sitting by the window, a warm cup of tea between my hands and a book half read in my lap. The light outside was golden, the trees swaying gently as if nature itself was honoring my stillness. At exactly 5:00 p.m., the first text came. Hey Mom, you coming? It was from David. Then another from Melissa. Everyone's asking where you are? Carly made that lemon pie you love. I sipped my tea and let the messages come. More emojis. More casual guilt cloaked in kindness. Hope everything's okay. It's not the same without you. Should we save you a plate? I placed the phone face down on the table. For so long, I had believed that showing up was love. That presence, no matter how overlooked, was proof of devotion. But now I was learning something else absence also speaks. Sometimes louder. Letting them feel my lack just once was more powerful than years of quiet tolerance. At 5:47 p.m., the doorbell rang. I froze. I wasn't expecting it. I thought they'd notice my absent shrug and move on. But there it was again. 2 short chimes, nervous, unsure. I didn't move right away. I stood slowly, placed my mug in the sink, and walked to the door with the calmness of someone who no longer owed anyone urgency. When I opened it, Carly stood there, alone. She wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big, her long hair pulled into a lazy braid, and her expression, that's what stopped me. She wasn't smiling. "Grandma," she said softly, "why didn't you come?" I opened the screen door gently, because I didn't feel like being invisible today. Her face twitched like she wasn't sure if I was joking. "I made the pie," she said. "I know it's not as good as yours, but I tried." I nodded. "That's sweet of you." We stood there for a moment, awkward and tender. Then she said, "Everyone's acting like it's no big deal. But I saw your messages. From the hospital." I didn't say anything because Mom told me not to worry. She said you were being dramatic. I felt my stomach twist, but not from surprise, from confirmation. And I didn't think it was fair, Carly whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't text more." I reached out and touched her shoulder. "You don't owe me an apology, sweetheart. This isn't about you." "But it is," she said. "Because if they can do this to you, they'll do it to me someday." Her words caught me off guard. She looked down. "I don't want to be like them." The ache in my chest, the one that had lived there quietly for months, years, shifted into something warmer. Not healed, but softer. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She followed me inside, and for the first time in what felt like a decade, the house didn't feel hollow. We sat at the kitchen table. I reheated some tea. She cut us 2 slices of her lemon pie. It was a little too tart, the crust uneven, but it was hers. We talked. Not about them. About books. About music. About how she felt like no one listened to her anymore. How she hated pretending to smile when she felt small. I listened. Truly listened. And I realized something else. Even if the rest of them never saw me again, even if David and Melissa continued to treat me like a tool, they occasionally remembered this connection mattered. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was real. Carly stayed for 2 hours. When she left, she hugged me tighter than she had in years. "I think they're going to be mad at me," she murmured. I smiled softly. "Sometimes telling the truth makes people uncomfortable." She nodded. "I want to tell it anyway." After she left, I stood in the doorway watching her walk down the sidewalk, tall, awkward, trying to become something bigger than what she'd been given. And in her silhouette, I saw a sliver of hope. Maybe I wasn't raising my voice into the void. Maybe someone, just one person, was finally listening. Melissa showed up the next morning. No warning, no call. Just the sharp sound of her heels on my porch, followed by the impatient chime of the doorbell once, then twice in quick succession. I knew it was her before I even looked. There was a rhythm to Melissa's presence. Always urgent, always directed, always walking into a room like she owned the air. I opened the door. She was dressed in a crisp blazer, her makeup flawless, her lips pressed into a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning," she said a little too brightly. I nodded. "Morning." She stood on the porch like a solicitor, one hand gripping her purse strap, the other clutching her phone. "Can I come in?" she asked, as if politeness could rewrite history. I stepped aside. She entered quickly, her eyes scanning the room, not for me, but for Carly, for signs, for ammunition. "She said she came here last night." She did. Melissa turned toward me. "I'm not upset she came. I would have appreciated a heads up." I raised an eyebrow. "You wanted her to tell you every detail of where she goes?" "No. Of course not," she said, voice tightening. "But you know how things have been. Tense. I think it would have helped if we had talked first." "Tense," I repeated. "That's one word for it." She sighed. Look, Linda, I'm not here to fight. I didn't respond. I let her talk. She came home crying, she continued. She said you told her we didn't care about you, that we ignored you during a medical emergency. I didn't tell her anything I said. She saw it all herself. Melissa folded her arms. You're twisting things. No, I said quietly. You're just not used to hearing me speak plainly. That caught her off guard. Her mouth opened, then closed. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I didn't offer her one. I'm sorry if you felt neglected, she said, following me, but we had no idea it was that serious. David thought it was just low blood sugar or something. He thought wrong, I replied, and he didn't bother to find out. She shifted. We've all been under pressure. The kid's David's job, my career. And I was in the hospital. I know. No, you don't, I said finally, turning to face her fully. You know how to say, I know. But you don't feel it. Because if you did, you would have been at my side. Or at least on the phone. Melissa's face hardened. She wasn't used to being spoken to like this. Especially not by me. I'm not the villain here, she said, quieter now. I didn't say you were, I replied. But you're also not the victim. There was a long pause. She looked down at her hands, and for the first time I saw something flicker, not guilt, but discomfort. The first cracks in her composure. Carly said she doesn't want to come to dinner next weekend, she murmured. She's finding her voice, I said. She's just a kid. She's 15, I replied. Old enough to know when she's being lied to. Melissa winced. We didn't lie. You minimized. You dismissed. You let your daughter believe that her grandmother crying alone in a hospital bed was being dramatic. That's a lie in a prettier dress. She rubbed her temple. This is getting out of hand. No, I said softly. This is the first time it's actually in hand. She looked up. What do you want from us, Linda? The question startled me. Because it was the same one I used to ask myself night after night. What did I want? An apology. A redo of the missed hospital visit. A sudden awakening from people who had spent years not hearing me. No, I didn't want anything from them anymore. I want peace, I said. And if that means distance, then so be it. She looked stunned. You're really cutting us off. I shook my head. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just not offering myself where I'm not seen. If you want a relationship, it'll have to be mutual. I won't be the only one reaching across the silence. She stared at me. Not angry. Just disoriented. Like I'd flipped a map she thought she knew by heart. I didn't come here for a lecture, she said, bristling again. And I didn't live 62 years to beg for basic kindness, I replied calmly. That was the end of it. She left a few minutes later, muttering something about needing to pick up groceries. I didn't follow her to the door. I didn't watch her drive away. Instead, I returned to my chair by the window. The light was different now, harsher midday sun spilling across the floor. But inside me there was quiet. Not the kind they used to give me, the punishing kind. This was earned quiet. Quiet I chose. 2 days after Melissa left, I heard another knock on my door. It was a softer knock this time. No rush, no tension. Just a gentle rhythm, like someone asking permission, not demanding entry. I pulled back the curtain slightly and was surprised to see Ryan, my youngest. Tea, please. He sat across from me like he used to when he was a boy, watching me, waiting. When the tea was poured and the silence settled again, he looked up. I didn't know he said. About the hospital. About the others. I didn't respond. I wanted to know where he was going. I know I've been absent, he added. Not just recently, for a long time. I stayed quiet. Because I had learned the power of silence. Let them fill it. I always thought you were okay, he continued. You made it look that way. You were always the strong one. That's what they all say, I said quietly. I know. He looked ashamed. I used that as an excuse not to reach out, not to ask. I thought, if you needed something, you'd say. I gave a soft laugh, bitter and short. That's the trick of being the strong one, Ryan. People stop checking in. They stop offering. They assume you'll bend but never break. He looked down. I'm sorry, Mom. The words were simple, but for once they weren't hollow. He wasn't saying it to end the discomfort. He was sitting in it, holding it, letting it sting. I came because I realized something, he said, voice quieter now. I've been living my life trying not to become Dad. Always working, always performing. And in the process, I forgot who held the house together after he died. I looked at him, my son, my quiet boy, the one who had always observed more than he spoke, who disappeared into books and music and dreams. What do you want, Ryan? I asked. He looked startled. From me, I clarified. What do you want this to be? He paused, took a breath. I want to know you, he said. The sentence caught me off guard. I don't mean as Mom, the Sunday roast, the babysitter, the reliable one. I mean you, the woman, the person, the one who raised us and somehow still stands after we forgot how to stand beside you. I felt something warm flood my chest. Not joy, not yet, but recognition. No one had ever asked that before. I don't know who I am outside of all that I admitted. I gave so much for so long that I forgot to check if I had anything left. Then let's find out, he said. I stared at him, really stared, and I saw the truth in his face. Not just guilt, not just apology, commitment. I don't want to fix this with a dinner or a phone call, he continued. I want to earn it. Slowly, properly, if you'll let me. I nodded. Not because everything was forgiven, but because something had finally begun. That night, we ate leftovers together. Nothing fancy, just soup I'd made the day before, but it tasted different, fuller, shared. He offered to do the dishes. I let him. After he left, I sat by the window and opened my journal again. August 12th. Maybe they won't all change, but maybe one is enough. Maybe healing doesn't start with a parade, but with one voice saying, I see you now. The next day, my phone rang again this time. David. I almost didn't answer. Not out of spite, but because I was still processing Ryan's visit. That conversation had felt like sunlight breaking through a window I didn't realize had been closed for years. But I picked up. Mom, David said, his voice clipped. Did Ryan come over? Yes. A pause, heavy and expectant. He didn't tell me he was coming to town. He doesn't have to, I said evenly. Well, I just think it's weird. Melissa said Carly's been talking about you a lot, and now Ryan's there, and... He trailed off, the unspoken words dangling like loose wires. And what I asked, and I feel like you're turning them against me. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. David, I'm not turning anyone against you. I'm just not covering for you anymore. There's a difference. He scoffed. Covering for me? What does that even mean? It means I've stopped pretending your neglect doesn't hurt. I said, my voice steady. I'm not going to smile through it anymore. Not for you, not for anyone. There was silence on his end. Then, you're making this bigger than it is. No, David, I replied softly. This is exactly as big as it is. You just haven't wanted to look at it. I could almost hear him bristle through the line. Ryan's always been dramatic, he muttered. He probably came to rile you up. Ryan came because he cared enough to ask how I'm really doing. Something you haven't done in a long time. That's not fair, he snapped. Isn't it? I asked. Another silence, longer this time. Then his voice softened just slightly. Mom, Are we really doing this? Doing what? Letting this whole hospital thing turn into a war? My lips pressed into a line. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want war. What I wanted was acknowledgement. But David had spent so many years thinking everything I gave him was just a given, that I was an unshakable pillar. I don't want a war, I said quietly. I just want you to see me. I do see you, he said quickly, but his voice sounded hollow, rehearsed. No, David. You see the version of me that's convenient, the mom who cooks and babysits and never complains. But the woman who sat alone in a hospital bed, you didn't even notice she was missing. There was a sharp inhale on his end. Then in a tone that sounded halfway between guilt and defensiveness, he muttered, I'll talk to Melissa. Maybe we can, I don't know. Come by later this week. You don't have to come by to save face, I said. Come if you mean it. Or don't. I'll be fine either way. Mom, I need to go, I interrupted gently. I have plans. The truth was, I did. Ryan and I were going to the old farmer's market that afternoon, the one I used to take him and David to when they were boys. He wanted to help me pick out fresh vegetables, maybe get coffee afterward. When I hung up, I felt a strange calm. For the first time, David's reaction didn't dictate how I felt about myself. He could bristle, blame, misunderstand, but I wasn't bending under it anymore. Ryan arrived an hour later, hands stuffed in his pockets, hair slightly messy. You ready? He asked, grinning like a boy again. We strolled through the market, the air smelling of fresh herbs and baked bread. I felt lighter. We talked about simple things. The books he was reading, the new cat he'd adopted, my favorite recipes. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about being present. Halfway through, my phone buzzed again. Melissa this time. I didn't answer. Ryan noticed. Want to get that? No, I said, smiling faintly. Not right now. His eyes softened. Good. That evening, I received a text from Carly. Mom's mad that I talk to you so much. She says I'm taking sides. But I don't care. I miss you, Grandma. My throat tightened. I typed back slowly. I miss you too, sweetheart. You can always come here. Later that night, as I sat at the kitchen table journaling, I realized something powerful. I was no longer waiting for David and Melissa to choose me. I was choosing myself. The knock came just after noon. 3 sharp raps. Not tentative, not friendly. Commanding. The kind of knock you use when you expect someone to open immediately. I knew it was them. I took my time walking to the door. When I opened it there, they were David and Melissa, standing shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed in uncanny unison like they had rehearsed this confrontation in the car. Melissa wore oversized sunglasses, though the sky was overcast. David looked tired, or maybe just annoyed. Mom, he said, nodding once. Linda, Melissa added, tone clipped. David. Melissa. I greeted calmly, stepping aside. Come in if you want to talk, but leave the performance at the door. They exchanged a glance, but stepped inside. I led them to the living room. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't bring out snacks. I didn't do what I'd always done, host. Instead, I sat across from them in my reading chair, the same chair where I'd watched the seasons change alone, year after year. Melissa was the first to speak. We're concerned. About what I asked. About how you're acting lately, she said. Carly is confused. Ryan's trying to stir things up, and you've been distant. I tilted my head slightly. You mean, I've stopped doing everything without being asked? That's not what she said, David interjected. I turned to him. Then what did you come here to say? He paused, opened his mouth, closed it. Melissa jumped in for him. We think you're making something small into something much bigger than it was. You're upset we didn't come to the hospital, fine, but you could have said something sooner instead of freezing everyone out. I did say something, I said evenly. I texted. I called. You saw it. You just didn't respond. Melissa shifted. We were at a theme park with the kids. I was having a stroke, I said. Her lips pressed together. David exhaled like this conversation was a burden. We're here now, he said. Isn't that what matters? I looked at both of them. No, I said. What matters is that I now know exactly where I stand. And I'm adjusting my life accordingly. Meaning what David asked, his voice rising. You're cutting us off over one mistake. One mistake. I repeated, my voice still soft, but now edged. David, it's never just one. It's every birthday you forgot, every dinner you skipped, every time you walked in, ate, and left without asking how I was, every time you let your wife decide how much I mattered in your life. Melissa's face hardened. That's not fair. And every time I bit my tongue to keep the peace, I continued ignoring her. Every time I said, it's okay, when it wasn't. Every time I made excuses for your silence. David's voice cracked. I didn't know it hurt you this much. I think you did, I said. You just didn't think it mattered. Silence. Then Melissa stood up. I think we've said enough. David stayed seated. Mom. He started, voice uncertain. What do you want me to do? I looked at him. My son. The little boy who once ran to me with every scraped knee. The teenager who shut his bedroom door. The man who now sat before me, unsure of who I had become, or perhaps unsure of who I'd always been when he wasn't looking. I want you to listen, I said. Not today. Not just this once, but consistently. I want you to see me not as an accessory to your life, but as a human being. With needs, with feelings, with limits. He swallowed hard. And if you can't do that, I added, then I'll stop showing up. David looked down. Melissa placed a hand on his shoulder, but he brushed it off gently and stood beside her. We'll talk later, he said quietly. I nodded. Only if you mean it. They left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them, and I exhaled, not out of relief, but release. I had done it. I had defended myself without screaming, without crying, without folding into guilt. For once, I wasn't trying to hold the family together. I was trying to hold myself together. And I had done that. Beautifully. That night, I made dinner again. Just for me. I lit a candle, played soft jazz, ate slowly, savoring every bite. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't imagining who I was cooking for. I was enough. It was the following weekend when Carly came back. She didn't call ahead. She just appeared at my doorstep like a gust of wind, breathless, nervous, and clutching a small backpack, like she was running away from something she didn't yet have the words for. Can I stay for a bit? She asked. I stepped aside instantly. Of course. She walked in quietly, cautiously, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to feel safe. I could tell something had shifted. Her face, usually so full of teenage bravado, was tense. Her eyes darted, watching mine like she was afraid of disappointing me. We sat on the couch. I didn't press her. She spoke first. They said I was being disrespectful, she murmured. Who I asked, though, I already knew. Mom. Dad. I told them I wanted to come back here. Just for a while. I told them I didn't like how they treated you. That pretending nothing happened made me feel like I was lying too. I swallowed. The courage it must have taken her to say that to them. What did they say? They told me to stop overreacting, she said. That I was too young to understand family dynamics. And what do you think I asked? She looked up at me then. Her face was flushed, her voice tight but determined. I think they forgot what family means. And I don't want to forget with them. A silence passed between us, full, emotional, complete. I just want to be here for a little while, she said again, softer now. If that's okay. I reached out, took her hand in both of mine. It's more than okay. She smiled, a little, small but real. Later that evening, I made us dinner. She helped in the kitchen, peeled carrots, mashed potatoes, stirred gravy. She was clumsy but eager, apologizing every time she spilled something or used too much salt. I didn't care. It wasn't about the food. It was about the rhythm, the kind of shared silence you only have when both people want to be there. At dinner, she picked at her plate before saying, "I think I want to come here more often. Maybe on weekends? Maybe longer. I don't know yet." I nodded. "One day at a time. I don't want to become someone who forgets the people who raised me," she whispered. That sentence broke something in me, in a good way, like a locked door finally giving way to light. "You won't," I said. "Not if you're already thinking like that." We didn't speak much after that. We watched a movie. She fell asleep with her head on my shoulder the way she did when she was little. I didn't move for an hour. I just sat there and let the warmth sink in. Not the warmth of redemption, the warmth of choice. She chose to come. She chose to see. And that choice was louder than any apology David or Melissa had ever mumbled. The next morning we made pancakes. She burned the first two, then laughed like she hadn't laughed in months. "I wish Mom could just say, 'Sorry,'" she said at one point, flipping a pancake. She doesn't know how, I said gently. Some people think silence is easier than admitting they're wrong. She's not going to be happy I'm here. She doesn't have to be, I said. What matters is that you are. That afternoon, David texted me. "Carly said she's staying with you. Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I showed the message to Carly. "What do you want to do?" I asked. She shrugged. "He'll be mad either way." "Maybe. But that's not your burden to carry." She looked at me. "Are you mad at him?" I thought about it for a long moment. "No," I said. "I'm just not waiting anymore." That evening we baked lemon bars. Carly called them revenge bars and giggled. I laughed with her. It wasn't about revenge. It was about rediscovering something they had all forgotten, that I was still here, still worthy, still whole. Melissa showed up 2 days later, not with a phone call, not with a text. Just a knock, sharp, deliberate, unapologetic. I didn't rush to the door. I didn't rehearse anything in my head. This time I answered on my terms. She stood there in athleisure, her hair pulled back tight, sunglasses resting on top of her head like a crown. She held her phone in one hand and a forced smile in the other. "Hi, Linda." "Melissa." She glanced inside. "Is Carly here?" "She is," I said. "Would you like to come in and speak with her?" "I'd actually like to speak with you first," she replied. I stepped back, motioned her in. We sat in the living room. I offered nothing, not out of malice but clarity. This was not a social visit. This was a reckoning. Melissa looked around like she was cataloging the house for anything to judge. Then she leaned forward, voice lowered like she was trying to sound intimate. "I'm concerned." "About what about Carly?" she said. "She's been emotional, withdrawn. Now she's asking to stay here more and more. I don't want her caught in the middle of whatever this is." "This," I said calmly, "is a girl realizing who listens to her." Melissa's lips tightened. "I think she's being influenced. She's very impressionable. Then maybe she's finally being impressed by honesty." She sat back, arms folding. "So this is how it's going to be. You pit my daughter against me and call it healing." "No," I said. "This isn't about pitting. This is about seeing. Carly sees what you don't want to admit." Melissa's voice rose slightly. "She's a child." "She's observant," I replied. "And she's choosing what feels real. If that threatens you, it's not her fault and it's not mine." Melissa stood. "I didn't come here to be insulted. I didn't insult you," I said. "But if the truth feels like one, maybe that says more than I ever could." She looked like she wanted to scream, or cry, or both. But she didn't. She swallowed it all like she always had, except now she wasn't the one controlling the temperature of the room. "She's not staying here forever," she said. "You know that, right?" I looked at her calmly. "That's up to her. She's my daughter." "Yes, but she's becoming her own person. And people don't belong to each other. They belong to themselves." Melissa stood in place, frozen by that. Then Carly walked into the room, hoodie sleeves, pushed up lemon bar in hand. "Mom," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here? I came to talk." Carly looked between us, sensing the charge in the air. "You could have called." Melissa flinched. "You didn't answer." "Because I didn't want to argue," Carly said. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "I like being here, that's all." Melissa stared at her for a long moment. "You're 15, she said. "You don't know what's best." "I know what hurts," Carly said. "And what doesn't." The silence that followed was thick with everything Melissa had never expected to hear from her daughter. And I stayed quiet. This wasn't my moment. This was Carly's. Melissa's shoulders dropped, and for a second, just a second, I saw the woman behind the armor. The mother trying to hold it all together. The woman who didn't know how to say I was wrong because she'd never had to. "Can we talk later?" she asked Carly. Carly nodded. "Maybe." Melissa turned to me. "I don't like how this is happening. But I can't stop it, can I?" "No," I said. "You can't." She hesitated at the door. "I'm not the enemy," she said. "I know," I replied. "But you've treated me like I was optional. And that has consequences." She opened the door, then paused. "If Carly wants to stay this weekend, fine. But we're going to have to talk about custody." "She's not moving in," I said. "She's just breathing." Melissa left. Carly exhaled hard, then slumped onto the couch. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "That felt like war." "No," I said, brushing her hair back from her face. "That was a boundary. And you held it." The invitation came quietly. It wasn't through a call or a conversation, just a message in the group chat, as if nothing had ever happened. "Dinner this Sunday at our place. Everyone's invited." David's name under it. No emojis, no photos, no fanfare. Just 10 words. Simple, neutral, but not innocent. It was the first time in years that he had included me in something without a favor attached. No requests for food, babysitting, or rides, just an invitation. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't answer. Not because I hadn't decided, but because I wanted to feel what it was like not to be the one who responds first. Not to be the one holding the conversation together. By Saturday evening, another message came. "Mom, we'd love for you to come. Carly will be there too. It's been a while." And then surprisingly, Melissa added, "It would be good to see you." Genuinely. I read those words again and again. Genuinely. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't dismissive either. Carly peeked over my shoulder as I read the messages. "You gonna go?" "I don't know yet," I said. She nodded. "You don't have to. Not unless you want to." And it wasn't it wanting. Not obligation, not guilt, not performance. Want. That night, I lit a candle and wrote in my journal. August 18th. They're reaching out, but I'm not rushing in. This time they can sit in the silence I once filled. If I go, it won't be to play the old role. It'll be as someone new, someone who knows her worth. On Sunday, I dressed slowly, not fancy, just thoughtfully. A long navy dress. The necklace Ryan had given me last year, a simple silver chain with a small book pendant. A nod to who I'd always been beyond just mom. At 4:55 p.m., Carly and I stood by the front door. She looked at me, uncertain. "Are we going?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. The sky was soft and warm, fading into that golden color it only achieves just before dusk. I think I said slowly, "I'm going to drive myself." Carly blinked. "You sure?" I smiled. "Yes. I think it's important." She nodded. "You want space to leave when you're ready." "Exactly." She hugged me fiercely. "I'll see you there if I come," I said. "And if I do, I'll come for me. Not for them." She didn't try to convince me. She just whispered, "I'm proud of you." She left first, walking with confidence down the path. I sat for another half hour, the car keys in my hand. Then I set them down and stayed home. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes your power isn't in showing up, it's in choosing not to. And in that absence, they might finally feel your shape, your weight, your silence. They might realize what it costs to take you for granted. I didn't need a chair at their table, because for the first time I had finally built my own. Peace doesn't come with an announcement. It arrives like a whisper, like the rustling of leaves just before dawn, and you don't always recognize it at first, not when you've spent most of your life mistaking tension for love and obligation for connection. That Sunday night, after I chose not to go to David's dinner, I half expected the universe to punish me. I expected guilt to knock at my door. I expected Melissa to call seething. I expected Carly to text disappointed. I expected regret to creep in around the edges like cold air under a closed door. But none of that happened. Instead, I experienced something that startled me with its simplicity. Nothing. No phone calls, no knocks, no accusations, just silence. And in that silence, I found a strange kind of joy. I lit a candle in the kitchen, not for ambiance or company, but for myself. I made a small meal, sautéed spinach, a soft-boiled egg, a slice of bread with honey. I ate slowly, barefoot, standing by the window. I had never realized how beautiful my house looked when I wasn't preparing it for others, when it wasn't a stage for visitors or a proving ground for worthiness. The walls breathed differently. The light felt more generous. Later, I put on a record Miles Davis and let the music curl around me like a shawl. I sat in my favorite chair tucked under a quilt I had sewn 20 years ago, and for the first time in decades, I let myself exist without needing to be useful. I didn't text anyone to explain why I hadn't come. I didn't check the group chat to see if they noticed. I didn't rehearse apologies for choosing myself. And that's when I realized this right here was freedom. Not the kind you shout from rooftops. The quiet kind. The kind that settles into your bones like warm tea. Around 9, my phone buzzed. It was Carly. I left early. It was weird without you. They acted like everything was fine, but it wasn't. I smiled, the kind of smile that starts small and grows in the chest rather than the mouth. I replied simply, "I'm proud of you. And I'm here, always." She sent back a heart emoji and said she'd visit Tuesday after school. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift again. Not in grief, not in anger, in clarity. The clarity of finally understanding that I don't have to be part of every performance just because I was cast in the role decades ago. They can throw their dinners, their birthday parties, their curated family scenes, and I can choose whether or not to attend. That choice, the ability to decide what spaces I give my energy to, was something I had never believed I had. But I do. I always did. I just hadn't claimed it. The next morning, I woke with a sense of ease. Not because things were perfect, but because for once I wasn't carrying everyone else's emotional baggage. I journaled for an hour. I wrote about my own mother, how she had been soft but invisible, always working in the background. I wondered if she'd felt the same ache I had. I wrote about how I wanted Carly to grow up differently, not as someone who gives until she disappears, but as someone who knows her limits and defends them. Later, I walked to the local flower shop. I bought 3 stems of lavender and 2 sunflowers, not because it was a special occasion, but because I wanted them. Because I was allowed to want things just for myself. I passed a neighbor who smiled and waved. I smiled back. And for once, I didn't feel the need to rush the interaction. I didn't have anywhere to be but here. I didn't have anyone waiting on me. I didn't have to shrink myself to fit someone else's plan. I was here. Fully. That afternoon, Ryan called. He'd heard I skipped the dinner. I bet they weren't thrilled, he said with a soft chuckle. I wasn't aiming to thrill them, I replied. He laughed again. That's what I love about you now, Mom. You're centered. I think I just stopped apologizing for existing, I said. He paused, then said, That's going in my notebook. Ryan always had a notebook full of poems, phrases, lyrics. He called it his emotional toolkit. You know, he continued, I think they're still trying to figure out what to do with the version of you who doesn't come running anymore. They'll adjust. Or they won't. He was quiet for a moment. Then I'm proud of you. It made me tear up not because I needed his validation, but because it was the first time someone in my family had said that, without it being connected to what I'd done for them. He wasn't proud of what I gave. He was proud of who I was becoming. On Tuesday, Carly came by. She walked in like she lived here and, in a way, she always had. Emotionally, at least. She brought a little bag of cookies from her school bake sale. They're dry, she said, rolling her eyes. Don't pretend they're not. I laughed. I wouldn't dream of lying. She told me about school, a rude teacher, a boy who liked her the way her friends didn't understand why she was spending less time at home. Do they think you're in a rebellion? I asked. They think you're a villain, she said. I looked at her surprised. She smiled, then added, But that's how stories go, right? The people who start changing always get cast as the bad guy first. I was speechless. She was 15, and already wiser than some adults twice her age. I hugged her tight before she left. She whispered, I want to be like you when I'm old. I replied, Be like you, but never forget your value. By the end of the week, I got a message from David. I'd like to stop by. No Melissa, just me. It sat in my inbox for hours. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit like a letter waiting to be weighed. Finally, I wrote back, If you're coming to apologize, come with intention, not obligation. He replied within minutes, I will. When he arrived 2 days later, he looked older, not tired, just humbled. Like a man who had finally seen the gap between who he thought he was and who he'd been. We sat on the porch. The conversation was slow at first. He asked how I'd been. I said free. That word hung in the air between us like incense, unexpected, heady. He nodded. I didn't get it, he admitted. All those years I thought you were fine. I thought silence meant strength. It meant I had no place to speak. He swallowed hard. You gave us everything, and we gave you scraps. I didn't respond. He didn't expect me to. He just kept going. I'm sorry, he said. Not just for the hospital, but for every time I chose convenience over connection. Every time I took without thanking you. Every time I let Melissa decide what kind of mother you were. Still, I didn't rush to fill the silence, because this wasn't about making him feel better. It was about finally letting the truth breathe. I want to do better, he said. But I don't know if I deserve a chance. You don't, I said. Not by default. But I'm open to seeing what you do with the time ahead. He nodded. That's fair. And that was it. We sat quietly for another hour. He left with no hug, no promise, just a soft goodbye. But it was enough, because it wasn't empty. It was real. Now I spend my days tending my garden, reading more, laughing with Carly, answering Ryan's calls, making lists of all the things I want to try now, pottery, yoga, French lessons. And sometimes I sit at the kitchen table, light streaming through the window, and marvel at how long I lived without realizing I was allowed to stop performing. I was never supposed to be the stagehand in my own life. Never just the one who dimmed the lights and made everyone else shine. I was always meant to be seen, to be heard. And now finally I am. Not because they decided I mattered, but because I did. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like the background character in your own family, know this: it's never too late to rewrite your part. Share your story in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribed to Grace's Truth for more journeys of quiet strength, truth, and emotional healing. You deserve to be heard. Always.